My name's Aaron. I'm 30 years old, and I've spent the better part of my life outside, studying, working, or just wandering. I'm a wildlife biologist, and my office is more often a stretch of forest or a mountain ridge than a cubicle. I've been lucky enough to work on projects across the Southeast, but my heart has always been in the Smokies, particularly near Fontana Dam in North Carolina. By the spring of 2023, I had my routine down. Every couple of weeks, I'd block out a stretch of days to hike sections of the Appalachian Trail. I liked how simple it all was. Signing into the register, tightening my pack straps, counting off the miles with nothing but my boots and my thoughts. It grounded me after long months of data analysis and endless grant paperwork. Trail registers are kind of old school in the best way. They're simple. A notebook tucked into a weatherproof box at shelters or trailheads. You scribble your name, the date, maybe your destination. It's part safety measure, part tradition. And for someone like me who often hikes alone, there's reassurance in seeing other names. Proof you're not the only one moving through these woods. It was March, but mornings were still frosty, cold enough to freeze the ground solid and make each step crunch just a little louder than you'd expect. I set out near Fontana, planning to loop a few smaller trails before heading northbound on the AT. My first day was uneventful in the best way. Birdsong, the chatter of squirrels, a hawk circling above like it owned the ridge. I signed my name in the register at the shelter near Shuck Stack, ate a protein bar, and stretched out under a sky that was just starting to bruise with evening. The second day, I met her. She couldn't have been more than 19 or 20. Hoodie pulled up despite the sun, jeans darkened at the cuffs from dew. No pack, no water bottle, no trekking poles, nothing. Just a girl standing where the trail forked, one foot pressed against the other like she was trying to anchor herself in place. I slowed, partly out of habit. Most hikers are eager to trade a word or two. It breaks the monotony. "You doing okay?" I asked. She lifted her head and her expression didn't match the situation. She didn't look panicked or tired. She looked calm. Way too calm. Her eyes were wide, dark in a way that didn't quite catch the light. "I'm just walking to find someone," she said. Her voice was soft, like a kid explaining something obvious to an adult. "Do you need water?" I asked. "Food? You'll want both if you're covering ground out here." She shook her head once. "I'm fine." I waited for her to elaborate, who she was looking for, where she'd come from. But she just stood there, hands in the hoodie pocket, gaze skimming past me down the trail. There's a line you don't cross as a hiker. You offer help, but you don't press. Everyone has their own rhythm, their own reasons for being out there. So I gave a small nod, adjusted the strap on my pack, and said, "All right then, safe hiking." She gave a faint smile, not a thank you, not a goodbye, just a curve of her lips. I walked on. For the rest of the day, I kept expecting to see her again. Maybe trailing behind me, maybe signed into the next register. But at each stop, the pages were empty of female names. Just mine, and a handful of others farther ahead. That night, I camped near a ridge overlooking a cove. The wind sang through the branches, and the air carried that damp earth smell I've always loved. But I couldn't quite settle. I kept looking back toward the trail, waiting for the crunch of footsteps, the flicker of movement between trees. Nothing came. By the third day, she was still lodged in my thoughts. I've run into plenty of hikers. Day trippers in sandals, through hikers with 1,000-yard stares. But never anyone out there with absolutely nothing. No gear, no plan, not even a name for the register. It nagged at me. When I reached the ranger station later that week, I mentioned it casually like I was making conversation. Saw a young girl near the Fontana section, Hoodie, no pack. Anyone else report her? The ranger, a weathered guy in his 50s, gave me a look. How young we talking? College age, maybe younger, I said. Dark hair, said she was looking for someone. He leaned back in his chair, arms folded. No one like that signed in. She wasn't in the register? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. He shook his head. No. And funny you bring it up, you're not the first person to mention a girl like that. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? Every couple years, someone says they run into her. Hoodie, no pack, same description. Always near Fontana. But when we check, no record, no hikers matching, nothing. He must have seen the look on my face because he added quickly, could just be coincidence. Folks misremembered details. Stories spread. But the way he said it didn't sound convinced. I drove home with that conversation rattling around my skull. The image of her, standing so calmly at the fork, like she belonged and didn't, burned itself into my mind. For weeks after, I replayed the scene in my head. Could I have missed a water bottle tucked under her hoodie? Maybe she was with someone else and just got separated. But no matter how I spun it, one fact held steady. She hadn't signed the register. Trail registers are like breadcrumbs. They're proof of movement, of existence. Seeing her without that trace made her feel untethered. I started signing my name more carefully. Full name, date, time, direction. I double-checked the ink. Sometimes I added little notes, blue jacket, heading north, just so there'd be no doubt I was real, that I passed through. Someone out there didn't leave their mark. And the part that unsettles me most, I keep thinking, maybe she didn't need to. I've always loved the Appalachian Trail because it strips life down to the essentials. You wake up, you walk, you eat what you can carry, you sleep, you do it again. And out there, when your world is just blazes on trees and the sound of your own boots, the smallest things take on oversized meaning. Water jugs at road crossings, the word trail angel. Most of the time, trail angels are exactly what they sound like. Ordinary people who pop up in the middle of nowhere with bananas, candy bars, jugs of water, maybe even rides into town. Sometimes they're former thru-hikers giving back. Sometimes they're locals who admire the journey. 99 times out of 100, they're exactly what you want them to be. A reminder that kindness still exists, even when you're filthy and limping. But that one time out of 100, that's the story I'm about to tell you. I'd been hiking northbound for just over a month, starting in Georgia and aiming for Katahdin if my budget and knees held out. By April, I was cruising past Damascus, Virginia. Trail Town, USA, they call it. The weather had finally settled into something like spring. The mornings were crisp, afternoons warm enough to make you sweat through your pack straps. That morning, I'd left camp near a creek, where I'd stealth pitched my tent, away from the noise of a crowded shelter. I'm not antisocial, but after a night of guys blasting bad country music, I decided peace was worth more than company. I was in my rhythm. Coffee in a squeeze bottle, oatmeal, boots laced, tracker on. Walk, breathe, repeat. By late morning, I heard the low hum of traffic, which meant the trail was curving toward a road crossing. My stomach perked up. Road crossings often meant coolers, or, if you were really lucky, trail magic. Sure enough, as I came down the last stretch, I spotted a car parked in a gravel pull-off. Trunk popped. A folding table set up with chips, bananas, gallon jugs of water, and a cooler. A man leaned against the bumper, sunglasses on, ball cap low, smiling like he'd been waiting. I slowed. This is where I always do the checklist. One man? Check. Mid-40s maybe. Alone? Yes. Hands visible? Yes. A plastic cup in one, nothing in the other. Table placement? Good, not wedged so I'd have to squeeze past him. No second car. No obvious red flags. Trail magic, he called out. Come grab a snack. His voice had the smooth, casual tone of someone who wanted you to feel safe. I stepped into the lot, wiping sweat from my forehead with my bandana. Appreciate it, I said. He grinned like a host greeting a guest. Name's Rob, he said. Then, without missing a beat, Leah, right? You look like you could use a cold drink. I froze just long enough for it to matter. He'd used my real name, not my trail name, Lark, the one every hiker knew me by. My real name. The name I hadn't introduced myself with since Springer Mountain. I covered it with a laugh, tapping the Sharpie letters on my smart water bottle. Trail name's Lark, I said. Leah suits you better, he replied, digging into the cooler. He came up with an orange Gatorade, sealed, condensation sweating. He offered it like it was a gift he'd bought just for me. I took it because refusing would have made the air even weirder. He slid a bag of chips toward me. How was your spot by the creek last night? He asked. Flat enough for a good sleep? The Gatorade bottle nearly slipped from my hand. That creek site wasn't a shelter. It wasn't listed on Far Out comments. I hadn't posted about it, hadn't told anyone. The only place that information existed was in my head and on my GPS tracker. You hike a lot around here? I asked carefully. Know the good stealth sites? He smiled with the tiniest twitch. I keep an eye on hikers, he said. Girls especially. It's not always safe out here. Saw you ping last night. Thought that's a good spot. Ping. The word stabbed through me. My GPS tracker, a little device clipped to my shoulder strap, sent pings to a satellite. I'd set it up in Georgia with my mom on FaceTime, not thinking much about the default settings. There was a share option, and apparently mine had been set to public. I forced my face into something resembling casual. You a former thru hiker? Do a lot of shuttles, he said. Help folks resupply. Safer when you've got someone local driving you around. He gave me a salesman smile. I can get you into Damascus easy, or slack pack you, carry your bag, meet you down trail. Plenty of women take me up on it. I nodded, cracked the cap on the Gatorade, and took a swallow to buy time. Inside, my nerves were scraping. Outward, I made my voice light. I'm good for today. Got my own rhythm. He didn't argue. Just kept smiling like he already knew I'd changed my mind. I walked to the far edge of the lot, pretending to adjust my pack, and pulled out my tracker. Thumbed through menus, my fingers were clumsy. Profile public. Share. On. Followers 38. My stomach lurched. I toggled it to private. Changed my username. Revoked all share links. Restarted the device just to be sure. When I looked up, he was watching me. Behind the sunglasses, his expression was unreadable. He didn't wave goodbye. He just stood there like a man who'd had something valuable taken from him. Thanks for the trail magic, I called, forcing cheer. Then I turned and walked back into the woods. The next few hours were tense. I didn't run. Running invites chase. But I walked fast, poles clicking, heart keeping time. Every car hum from the road made my shoulders tighten. At a side trail to water, I found an older couple eating peanut butter on a log. I lingered just long enough to refill bottles and ask if they were heading for the next shelter. They said yes. I fell in line a little ahead of them, using their presence like a buffer. Late afternoon, the trail dipped to another road, gravel, then asphalt. I stepped out of the trees, looked left, and there he was again. Same sedan, same posture, same smile. Hey, Leah, he called, like we were old friends. Change your mind about that ride? My blood ran hot. He hadn't even bothered with Lark. I raised my voice, angling it toward the woods. There's a group right behind me. We're heading to the same shelter. His smile didn't disappear, but it got a lot less friendly. "You girls don't need to be stubborn. You're moving about 2.2 miles an hour. That puts you at Taylor Valley by 6. I can meet you there with pizza, or slack pack you, make it easier." He knew my pace. He'd studied my track when it was public. He'd memorized it. "Good to know," I said, forcing calm. I turned and walked back into the woods before he could say more. That night at the shelter, I cooked rice and tuna with shaky hands. Other hikers laughed, traded stories. The older couple from earlier rolled in and gave me a nod that said they'd seen him too. At one point, a car idled out of sight for a long minute before driving off. Nobody joked about it. Nobody wanted to. I wrote my name in the shelter register. Lark, 412, pushing through to Damascus. No mention of him. I didn't want to give him permanence in ink. Sleep came in shallow snatches. Every crack of a branch sounded like footsteps. Every dream was a car trunk waiting to close. In Damascus, I went straight to the outfitter, bought blister tape. At the counter, I asked, "Do you all ever hear about people tracking hikers through GPS apps?" The woman behind the counter looked at me like she'd heard it before. "Sometimes," she said. "Defaults are public. You'd be surprised how many women forget to toggle private." I told her the short version. She wrote the non-emergency ranger number on a scrap of paper and slid it across the counter. "Call and tell your tramley. Word travels fast." I did both. Called the ranger, gave a description, times, places, and told other women in town. 2 days later, I passed another cooler at a crossing. Took a Coke, wiped the rim, sat on a log. A pickup rolled by slow, then faster. Dust hung in the air. I thought about Rob, if that was even his name. Thought about the way he'd said Leah like he owned it. I haven't given up on people. I've just tightened my boundaries. I'm not naive anymore. My tracker stays private, my face isn't on my profile, and if anyone ever greets me by a name I didn't give them, the conversation ends right there. The way he used my name like a key, like he'd already let himself in. When I look back, what sticks isn't his car, or his smile, or even the words. It's the realization of how small the boundary had been. One toggle on one app, a door I hadn't realized I'd left open. Now, when I cross a road, I look both ways. Not just for cars, but for people waiting. I check my tracker every morning. I lock my doors, digital and otherwise. I've hiked a lot of places over the years, but the Grayson Highlands in Virginia has always been one of my favorites. Everyone goes for the wild ponies, and yeah, they're just as magical as the Instagram posts make them look. But for me, it's more than that. The whole place feels otherworldly. Wide open balds, twisted trees, fog that rolls in without warning. It's the kind of trail where you think you're just out to laugh with friends and take photos, until something reminds you how small you really are. I learned that lesson the hard way. It was May 2022. I'd taken a long weekend off and planned a trip with two of my closest friends, Kara and Matt. None of us were hardcore thru hikers, but we'd all done enough backpacking to handle a few nights out. The idea was simple: hike, find the ponies, camp under the stars, disconnect from our phones, and just be. That first day was everything we wanted it to be. The weather was perfect. Blue skies, just enough breeze to keep the sweat manageable. Kara kept pulling us aside for photo ops, demanding we pose with every other rock formation or patch of wildflowers. Matt kept joking about how he was going to smuggle a pony home in his trunk. And me, I was just soaking it in, happy to be away from work and screens. By late afternoon, we found a campsite tucked just off the trail. It wasn't an official shelter, but it was flat, close enough to a water source and gave us a great view of the ridge. We cooked ramen on our little stoves, shared some cheap wine from a plastic bottle, and laughed about stupid college stories until the fire died down. Everything felt normal. Safe. Around 10 p.m., when we'd all crawled into our tents, I started to drift off to the sound of wind pushing through the trees. And then I heard footsteps. Not the scampering of a raccoon or the padded thump of a deer. These were different. 2, 3, pause. Then again. At first, I thought it was just another late-night hiker passing through. It happens. The trail doesn't close. But the thing that got me was how the steps seemed to stop just beyond the glow of our fire pit. Too close to be casual. Too careful to be unintentional. "Did you guys hear that?" I whispered across the tents. "Probably a deer," Matt muttered, already half asleep. But Kara sat up. "That didn't sound like an animal." The steps stopped. Then came the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. Nothing happened after a while, so we just moved on like it didn't matter. The woods are noisy. They play tricks. I lay there for another hour, listening. Nothing came closer. Nothing moved away. The next morning, it felt silly to even bring it up. We joked about our ghost hiker as we packed up and set off again. By the time we made camp the second night, my nerves from the night before had mostly worn off. We found a spot a little deeper in the woods this time, away from the open fields. Dinner, fire, laughter, the usual. But later, around the same time as before, the footsteps came back. This time, all three of us heard them. "Hello?" Kara called out, her voice shaking. "Is someone out there?" No answer. Just the sound of a branch snapping, then silence again. Matt grabbed his flashlight and said, "I'm checking." We all protested, but Matt was stubborn. He clicked on his light and stepped off the trail, sweeping the beam between trees. Kara and I stood close to the fire. A few long minutes passed. Then he shouted, "You guys need to see this." We hurried over. He was crouched near a tree, pointing at something buried under some leaves. At first, I thought it was trash, but then the beam hit glass. It was a phone, an iPhone, lying face up, recording. The red timer on the screen ticked past 2:17:36. It had been filming for over 2 hours. Matt picked it up carefully. It was under the leaves. Someone hid it here. The three of us stared. None of us had dropped it, and it clearly wasn't abandoned. The battery was half full. Camera pointed right at the trail. Matt swiped to stop the recording, and then we started scrolling through the gallery. The first clips showed hikers, dozens of them, walking by in daylight. Each clip was only a few seconds long, like someone had hit record every time someone passed. Families, couples, solo hikers, all unknowingly filmed. Then came the one that made everything inside me clench. It was us, walking that same trail, laughing about ponies, recorded from the side like someone had crouched just off the path. Kara looked at me, stunned. That was yesterday. I wanted to drop the phone right there. We carried it back to camp, but suddenly the woods didn't feel like the woods anymore. Every shadow felt like eyes. Every little noise felt like someone stepping closer. "Someone planted it," Matt said. "They're filming hikers." "But why?" I asked. "What's the point? Just random footage?" Nobody answered. That night we didn't bother with jokes or wine. We kept the fire burning low and all sat facing outward, knives and trekking poles in easy reach. Around 3 a.m., a distant flashlight beam flickered through the trees. It didn't move like a hiker's headlamp. It was low to the ground, sweeping side to side. Searching. We killed our own lights instantly. Sat there, holding our breath, while the beam passed slowly across the ridge and then faded. I don't think any of us slept after that. At dawn, we packed faster than we ever had in our lives. None of us wanted to linger. We hiked straight into town, nerves jangling. At the ranger station, we handed over the phone. The officer on duty listened, took our statement, bagged it like evidence. "We'll send it to tech," the officer said. "Might be tough without consent." "Whose consent?" I asked. My voice came out harsher than I meant it to be. "Whoever hit it," he gave a tired shrug. "People film on trails, usually harmless, but we'll check." It didn't do much to calm me. Weeks passed. None of us ever heard back with answers. The phone was locked, maybe untraceable. Maybe it never even got cracked open. But what I can't shake is the thought of those clips. Someone had gone to the trouble of planting a phone under leaves, letting it run, collecting videos of strangers. Not just us, everyone. And if they'd been doing it once, what were the chances it was the only time? Sometimes I wonder if our faces, our voices, ended up on some hard drive somewhere. Maybe we're files in a folder marked Trail. Maybe we're being watched even now. Not as hikers, but as data points in someone's obsession. The woods used to feel like freedom to me. Now they feel less empty. Like every tree could hide a lens. Like every footstep behind me might not be another hiker catching up. You know what really gets me? If Matt hadn't checked the woods that night, if he hadn't spotted the glint under the leaves, we never would have known. We'd still be out there, laughing and posing for pictures, oblivious to the fact that someone had been watching the whole time. Working in outdoor gear means living in the spaces you sell. I spend weeks on the road hitting trail towns, demoing stoves, filters, boots. I've heard every question in the book. Will these shoes work on wet rock? Is it dumb to backpack alone? That last one always gets my double answer. No, it's not dumb, but you don't owe honesty to strangers. If someone asks if you're alone, the answer is no. Always. I'd wrapped up an event in Hot Springs and decided to reward myself with a night up on Max Patch. It's one of those grassy balds where the mountains unfold in layers of blue. Wide open, starry skies, families picnicking, hikers camping. I'd slept there before without issue. I pulled into the gravel lot, packed light, and started up the trail. Halfway up, I stopped to take in the view, and that's when I saw him. Camera slung across his chest, clean shoes that didn't look like they'd earned dirt. He stood off to the side, like he was waiting. "Hey there," he said. "You hiking alone?" Reflex. My boyfriend's right behind me. I said it flat like weather. "You camping up top?" Quick sunset, early morning, long drive. "We?" he asked. I didn't bite, just nodded and kept moving. Up top, I pitched my tent near the tree line, door angled toward the trail. My routine is muscle memory. Stakes down, fly taut, keys by the door where I can hit the panic button without thinking. If safety is a religion, this is my ritual. The man wandered the bald, camera swinging, shooting the horizon. Every so often, his lens swept across me like a lighthouse beam. He didn't point it, but I knew. Later, he passed close. "Good night for stars," he said. "Looks that way." "You said your boyfriend was right behind," he added, like he was fact-checking. "Stop to take photos," I said, not looking at the trail. He nodded, satisfied with an answer I'd built from nothing. Sunset turned the bald gold, people clapped, headlamps bobbed down to the lot. By 10, only a few tents glowed in the grass. I zipped mine tight, headlamp on one side, bear spray on the other, whistle clipped where I could reach it blind. I propped a trekking pole inside the zipper. If someone tugged, it would catch. Sleep was light, just drifted in and out, half aware the whole time. Then came footsteps, even careful human steps tracing a slow arc around my tent. "Hey babe," I said at normal volume. "That you?" Silence. The steps stopped, then resumed, pausing at the head, then the foot. Something brushed the fly just enough to make the nylon bow inward. At the zipper, a tap on the metal pull, a fingertip saying hello. Then, inches from my ear through mesh, you lied. No laugh, no anger, just certainty, like a bill collector naming a debt. I kept my thumb right over the panic button, but I waited. Sometimes silence holds more power. The steps widened, then circled back, indecisive. At last they faded into the wind. When morning came, I unzipped. A ring of footprints darkened the dew around my tent, deeper than my own, circling, overlapping at the vestibule. I packed and left. Down by the trees, a red-haired woman waved as she zipped her tent. I almost asked if she'd heard anything, but I kept it to myself. At the car, I locked the doors before sitting. I typed a report into my phone to send when I hit service. Male circling tents at max patch. Whispered at mine. Camera. Footprints. When bars appeared, I called the non-emergency line. The dispatcher didn't scold, didn't minimize, just logged it. I didn't quit solo hiking after that, but no more balds for overnight. And I like another tent door within shouting distance. A month later, demoing gear in Johnson City, a man walked up with a similar camera rig. Asked about filters, nodded, bought spare cartridges, left. Maybe just a photographer. Maybe more. I'll never know. I did lie. I will again. Not because I'm ashamed of being alone, but because survival belongs to the person willing to invent company when needed. I didn't plan on becoming the guy who tells stories about lights in the mountains. Honestly, when I dropped out of college that fall, the last thing I wanted was to end up as some dude on a forum posting about weird experiences, like I was trying to win campfire clout. But the truth is, I can't tell the story of that trip without including the lights. And I can't tell the story of the lights without admitting what they did to me. I was 22, stubborn, and more sarcastic than wise. Dropping out had felt less like a decision and more like gravity finally pulling me down after years of fighting it. My brother had let me crash on his futon in Richmond, but after a week of listening to his neighbors scream at each other about car keys at 3 a.m., I packed up my beat-up Honda and told my mom I was going on a soul search hike. She seemed impressed. The reality was, I just wanted to be anywhere other than that futon. The Appalachian spine of Virginia has a way of making you feel both trapped and free at the same time. The map said rolling terrain. In practice, that meant you climbed one hill just to find another waiting like it had been rehearsing. I borrowed a too-big pack from a friend, filled it with ramen, a tent, and a stove that had more soot than metal. October had snapped into gear, the air crisp, leaves crunching underfoot, sky washed in hard autumn blue. It wasn't anything crazy. Just hike up to a ridge, camp by a spring, and head back down the next day. Nothing heroic, nothing extreme. I just needed time where the only decisions were left foot, right foot, filter water. Try not to get eaten by anything with sharper teeth than me. By late afternoon, I crested the ridge. It stretched out like a spine, treeless in sections where old burns had cleared the brush, then folding back into thickets of laurel. Off to the east, the hills turned from green to smoky blue, stacking into the distance until they were more suggestion than substance. The wind up top was steady, enough to push at your jacket and remind you you were small. The spring trickled from a pipe set into a slope, spilling clear and cold into a trough of moss and leaves. I filled my bottles, boiled ramen, and stirred in a scoop of peanut butter like it was some culinary masterpiece. I watched the sun scrape itself down the sky while my socks flapped on a branch. I'd expected solitude, but the silence was thicker than I imagined. Mostly it was just me, the wind, and the kind of quiet that makes your thoughts louder than you'd like. That's the moment I saw them. Across the gap on the next ridge, 3 soft glows floated into view. They weren't the stabbing white beams of headlamps. They were warmer, like lanterns, but too steady to be flames. They drifted in a slow arc against the wind as if someone had tied them to invisible strings. My first thought was hikers. Maybe a family night hiking with old-school lanterns. Then I thought, drones. People fly them around here all the time, buzzing hikers for kicks. That seemed more likely, though drones usually whine like mosquitoes and I couldn't hear a thing over the wind. I waved like an idiot, kind of joking, but hoping to confirm someone was actually there. The lights moved. One rose slightly, then sank. The other 2 shifted with it, as if they were holding formation. The hair on my arms lifted, and for once it wasn't just the cold. I told myself it was nothing, but my curiosity shoved me forward. A spur trail led toward a knob that would give me a closer view. Against all better judgment, I grabbed my headlamp, left it off, and crunched down the trail. The knob jutted into space, offering a wide-open angle at the ridge. There were 4 lights now, arranged in a shallow arc. They weren't in sync like lanterns carried by people. They weren't random either. Each one seemed to claim a position and hold it like they cared about geometry. "Anyone out there?" I called, but my voice felt too small for the night. Nothing answered except the wind. One light began to drift toward the gap between the ridges. It glowed soft, edges blurred like the screen of a phone under fabric. No beam, no flicker, no noise. I told myself again, drones, kids messing around, farmers playing with lanterns on lines. Something with a remote, something with an explanation. But the lights didn't behave like anything with rules. They didn't care about the wind, didn't care about terrain. They cared only about spacing, about circling. When the closest one slid nearer, too near, my body voted with its legs. I jogged back toward camp, boots snapping twigs like fireworks. I risked one look back. The nearest light had crossed half the gap, moving straight and silent like a line between 2 points. I hit the ridge, found the saddle, and sprinted the last 100 yards to my tent. I yanked it around so the door faced away from the gap, dove inside, and killed my headlamp. I sat with my back against the door, holding tight the whistle hanging from my pack strap. I thought about blowing it, then pictured the lights responding to my noise. So I set it down. The wind pressed at the fabric. Through the gap under the vestibule, a faint haze glowed across the ground. There then gone, like someone flicking a dimmer. Once, I swear, I felt warmth brush my face, like standing too close to a screen. My body insisted every sound meant something. Somewhere, faint, the glow shifted again. And then, after what felt like an hour, it receded. The ridge darkened to ordinary, and my tent became just nylon again. At dawn, when I climbed back to the knob, all I found were my own muddy prints and the scuff marks where I'd turned too fast. Down at the trailhead, a man in a camo hat sat on a tailgate drinking coffee. He squinted at the ridge when I mentioned lights. "They've been on that ridge a long time," he said. "My granddad called them watchers." I laugh about it now. Joke about UFOs, say my anxiety glows. Humor makes a good shield. I don't know what I saw. Maybe drones. Maybe tricks with lanterns and fishing line. Maybe just my tired brain inventing patterns. Or maybe there are things that don't care what explanation you rent for the night. Either way, I've learned this. Sometimes when the wind tells you to move on, you listen. If the scariest part for you wasn't the threat, but realizing you'd have no help out there? Smash that like button, hit subscribe so you never miss the next scare, and drop how you'd handle these nightmare trails in the comments. And if you think strangers in the woods are unsettling, wait until you meet the ones who show up at your front door from Marketplace. Click now to watch 4 scary Facebook Marketplace horror stories. Because sometimes the real predators don't wait in the forest. They wait behind a for sale sign. Thanks for watching. Stay alert, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.